Hello and welcome to episode 19 of the Millennium Pod, a Star Wars podcast by me, Ari, at ari.in.space on TikTok and at millenniumpod_ on Twitter and Instagram. This week, I am super fortunate to have the wonderful Master Alan on this episode of the pod. So why don't you go ahead and just give us a little rundown of your Star Wars journey, what Star Wars means to you, because after all, this is a Star Wars podcast.
I'm from the generation where the only Star Wars we had was the original trilogy. And so that was my first Star Wars. I was, somewhere in the neighborhood of 8-9 years old, and my first viewing of Star Wars was a bootleg VHS that had been recorded from HBO. And so part of my root Star Wars memory includes the old HBO intro splash video that they had, just from the era that it existed, that it was recorded from. And so that was my beginning. I was the little kid seeing a fantasy story with wizards and knights and an evil empire and the good guys triumphing over the oppressive evil. And for the longest time as a kid, Return of the Jedi was my favorite of the original trilogy because good guys win. My favorite color was green, and Luke had a green lightsaber. So there's all these things, and also, as a 9-10-year-old, the Ewok fight is everything that you want as a 9-year-old from an action sequence, because it is equal parts dramatic and funny, and so there's enough things that aren't really intense and scary. There's enough funny things mixed in with the intense stuff that you don't stay afraid. And so that's especially as an adult viewer, and an adult with kids, one of the things that you start to see more and more is when a sequence in a movie keeps a younger viewer, somebody under the age of 11 or 12 or whatever, if there's a sequence in a movie that keeps somebody of that age group in a tense, I wonder what's going to happen, I don't know if it's going to be okay moment, you notice that more as a parent. And so there's all these things that you either don't remember or never noticed because you saw it as a teen or an adult or whatever, that now all of a sudden you're seeing it through this other lens of the person sitting next to you, and you go, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
Land Before Time was a movie from a different generation than yours, probably. You might have seen it. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. I saw it when I was young.
But there's Land Before Time has got a rough opening. It's rough.
I'm rough. Scarred for life. I'm scarred for life from just the first movie alone, the first 5 minutes.
The opening, basically the beginning of Lion King is really similarly really, really tough. Mm-hmm. And those are things that, when you saw it younger, and then it was a movie that you watched over and over and over again, like Star Wars or Lion King or whatever it is, with whatever traumatic moment that you will is burned in your brain forever. Mm-hmm. But as kids, we'll watch the same things over and over again, because once we know it's going to be okay, then we can watch those things a second or third or fifth or eighth time, and all the fear is gone because we know how it's going to work out, and so we sit with them differently, right?
Right.
As an adult, I love what happened with Empire. As a kid, when I was first a fan, I hated Empire. Empire was filled with all the stuff that 9-year-olds don't like. Bad guys win.
Yeah.
It's nothing is okay.
Everything sucks at the end of that movie.
There are friends that betray friends, and they kind of sort of stop, except a lot of bad stuff happened because friends betrayed friends. Somebody got a hand chopped off. There's all of this, there's nothing about Empire that's okay. And so as a 9-year-old, that was a really, really rough movie. Now, as an adult, appreciating some of the the filmmaking aspects and other things, I recognize how amazing Empire Strikes Back is as a movie, and and how triumphant it is and all that kind of stuff. And then, going from 9 years old to today, anything that is vaguely lightsaber shaped, wrapping paper tube, stick, whatever, like it can instantly be a lightsaber. My imagination can still do that for me. I can turn it on and
That's
make the
awesome.
noises and like that, because you never grow out of that. I mean, some people do.
Some people do, but
definitely do. But
they're lame compared to those who don't.
I have elected not to. I have elected to keep that adolescence. And that was my introduction to Star Wars. When the prequels first came out, I was in my early 20s. I was one of the fans that did not like the prequels. There were and some of my objections to the prequels are a little different than the hate that continues to exist for the prequels. Like Jar Jar is going to be a pinata for a certain section of online community forever.
Forever, yep, absolutely.
But now looking back and understanding that a movie that is that big, not every scene in that movie is going to be for me. And so when I saw that movie, my least favorite scene in The Phantom Menace was the pod racing, because I knew what was going to happen. Because, like, if Anakin didn't get broken out of slavery, there's not a way to bridge the prequels to the original. So, like,
yeah,
how, like, I knew how it was going to go, and so it was watching something that was like, this isn't. There's no tension here for me. I don't find this interesting. This is a video game advertisement, and it's a video game that I'm probably not going to play. So for me, I struggled with that scene because it didn't feel like the stakes were real. Meanwhile, if you talk to a fan now that first saw that movie when they were 10, 11, 12 years old, the pod racing is one of their favorite scenes in the movie. It's one of their fond memories of it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was 20, it never occurred to me that movies were made for people that weren't me. I didn't have any empathy or understanding of that at all. Everything was either something I found interesting or something I didn't. And I had no ability to recognize, understand that there's going to be scenes in some movies that are for a different audience that's not me. 20-year-old me didn't get that, didn't understand that there were other people in the audience that weren't me, and that there were things that were designed to capture those people, whether they're nostalgia, like, the longer you're a Star Wars fan, the more little things in Star Wars are going to be nostalgia for you. Like Rogue One is just packed full of things that are, all right, you've been a fan for a really long time, this is for you. Mm-hmm. And the newer fans aren't necessarily going to connect with that. They're not going to resonate with it. In The Last Jedi, the name escapes me, but the floppy-eared horses.
Oh yeah, I just watched it too, and I don't know.
But that whole, like, that sequence, the freedom and the adventure of that sequence, that wasn't for fans my age. That wasn't for me. That was for younger people that got to see these amazing creatures and got to see this exciting chase escape scene that, like, takes them across this planet and shows them how big this world is. Mm-hmm. Like, this is a giant world that is a little bit like our own, but entirely unlike it as well, that all of these things are happening on. And there's this bigger galaxy conflict. Is the whole reason why they're there in the first place. But this planet is also full of, people that go to the grocery store to buy eggs and milk.
Yeah.
And, that was something that was for other fans. That wasn't necessarily for people in my age group.
Yeah,
because, we look at that sequence and there's like, well, wait a minute. Or, and there's questions or there, other things like that. Whereas, especially a movie that is going to have to make the kind of money that a Star Wars movie is going to have to make in order to continue making Star Wars movies, they got to be for everybody.
Exactly. Yeah.
and that's been a part of my Star Wars journey. And like I enjoyed seeing the sequels in theaters tremendously more than seeing the prequels. Because I was a different fan at that point. I had a better understanding of the different people that also loved Star Wars with me, and the different reasons that they loved Star Wars. The lightsaber business that I'm always a little bit like, I feel awkward about plugging when I'm on podcasts, because like
you
but
gotta.
you invited me to talk about Star Wars, and that's the part that I'm just like, no, let's talk about Star Wars.
But
I've been
also the
waiting for this
lightsaber
since I was in
company.
5th grade. Somebody wants to hear what I think about Star Wars? 11-year-old me is 11-year-old me is vibrating faster than the speed of light. Uh, but the connection of Star Wars to the martial art, like it was 2015, 2016, somewhere in there. I discovered that there were companies that made durable lightsabers. And so the samurai sword curriculum that I was teaching, I discovered that, and I was 11 years old again. It was like I found out that it's like, this is a thing. This is a thing. Nobody was going to tell me this was a thing. I had to discover this by accident. And because if in my samurai sword class I was struggling to have consistent retention of people kind of progressing through the curriculum and stuff. Because if I hand somebody a wooden sword and say, pretend this is a sword, people can get like 80% of the way there.
Mm-hmm.
But there's only so cool that is.
Yeah.
Like it's, and there's some people that like, they really connect with getting to be a samurai, whether it's an anime fandom or a Kurosawa fandom or whatever. But if I hand somebody an expensive flashlight that they could beat somebody into the hospital with, if not more seriously than that. If I hand somebody that expensive flashlight and say, pretend this is a lightsaber, zero problems. Everybody is 115% of the way there. Like as soon as they're holding it, they're there.
Yeah, definitely. I know that when I got the lightsaber from your company recently, I was running around with it, and my roommate was like, what are you doing? And I'm like, it's so cool. Look at this. Listen to the sounds. And then
and the lightsaber's making noise, and you are too.
Yeah, I accidentally turned the sound font off, and then I was too lazy to read the instructions how to turn it back on. So I was just making the sound effects by myself. My roommate was like, I need to move out probably. But it's so cool.
You find a better roommate anyway. It's fine.
No, she's pretty supportive.
Oh, that's good. That's excellent. Mm-hmm. You should do a pod with her as like a guest host or something. It'd be great.
I should actually. She watched her very first Star Wars movie ever with me the other day. It was The Force Awakens, which I know is not like, I would normally start with A New Hope, but I had to watch The Force Awakens anyway for my other podcast. And I was like, I'm watching this if you feel like it. And she was like, yeah, totally. So I think now we're going to go back and start 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 7, 8, 9, because I think that's the best, but I don't know.
I don't know that there's a wrong order.
Well, I think starting with the Phantom Menace is the wrong choice for new people. Don't get me wrong, I love the Phantom Menace. I'm a rare Star Wars fan that actually loves that, mainly because I love Qui-Gon. I love Qui-Gon, and that's all we have of him other than like 40 seconds in the Clone Wars and a book. Oh. So I will rewatch the Phantom Menace all the time.
Just for Liam Neeson, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. It's so good, but but I wouldn't start. I wouldn't start with that.
So like, it depends on the age of the person. So like, if it's somebody that's older like you, the Force Awakens is a really good gateway movie because it was made with the intention of being an introduction to the franchise as a whole. Like, it's a story that
it is pretty self-contained. Like you don't. The only things you really miss are those like nostalgia things, right? Like, and I mean, she doesn't live under a rock, so she knew like who Luke, Han, and Leia were, knew they were a big deal, and that's really all you need to know. Like,
and everybody has been spoiled about the Darth Vader reveal at this point. Like, there's nobody that like sees Empire Strikes Back for the first time.
I know. I've seen so many people being like, you can't watch it machete order because then they'll know the Darth Vader reveal. And I'm like, who doesn't know who doesn't know that? Anyway, in the interest of keeping us on track of what I truly want to hear from you, you have your own lightsaber company, and it's awesome. Level Up Light, and I would love to hear some more about that from you.
But so it started out, I wasn't trying to sell lightsabers. I was just trying to teach, because most people are only good at like one thing. Like some people are good at two, some people are good at three. Most people are only good at one. And my one thing is being a teacher. And I very confidently say that I am a good instructor. I've had a lot of feedback from people telling me that I'm a good instructor. And so I feel confident sharing that, despite imposter syndrome and all manner of other things that I can. And so I took my curriculum, I filmed it, broke it down, and put it up on the Level Up Lightsaber site. And the original goal was gamified lightsaber training, because I thought this could work. This could be cool. Getting a website built is a lot like trying to cook a steak by having a line of people like come through and they breathe on it. And so then they come in and then the next person does that. And so like technically it gets a little warmer every time, but it just takes a really long time to get where you're going.
Yep.
And so I was prioritizing.
Quite the analogy.
I ripped it off from somebody, but I don't know who. It was an author that their book was getting made into a movie, and that was what they described getting a movie made as being. There are going to be. I'm going to use this.
Yeah, that's perfect.
I'm going to have a use for that.
I'm stealing that now too.
Please do, because there are all kinds of things that it applies to. It finally launched. I was prioritizing that project quite a bit throughout that time as well, as part of the reason that there are a lot of movies that I missed. And it struggled to take off. I didn't have a really, really big class locally, so I didn't have a lot of people that were like automatically logging in to boost it. I didn't have personally a very big social media presence. And so from a marketing standpoint, there weren't a whole lot of people that were just like, oh, I want to learn to use a lightsaber. Mm-hmm. And COVID gave me a unique opportunity to start basically test driving manufacturers. And so I tried sample products from a bunch of companies. I mean, a bunch. I went through all kinds of stuff trying to find the company that was going to be the right one for me to pick for the curriculum. I ultimately arrived at a company called LGT. And so I'm one of their certified people. There are a lot of LGT companies out there. It's a lot of the things that people reference first. It's like Crimson Dawn, Dark Wolf. There are a lot of companies that LGT is their supplier. And there are very few companies in general that if you purchase something from their retail site, that they directly make it. Sometimes they assemble it, and there are other people that make it for them. Sometimes it's a situation like me where there's certain product that I'm going to represent and support. And so those are the things that I order, so that then when you order from me, I have stock that I send to you. Mm-hmm. In the same way that like when you go to Walmart, like Walmart didn't make any of it.
Yeah.
So I found the company that I wanted to work with. They had product that did what was important to me. At this point now, I've got a really good relationship with my rep with the company, so that when I have problems and other things, I have a person that I can contact where I say, I'm having this issue. Mm-hmm. And then they work on making it right. And because I am, a big enough client and certified and everything else, like the person that everything that I need to do with the company, whether it's customer support, new ordering, whatever, I have one person I contact. And so one of the nice things about working with me or one of the other people that are connected with any other manufacturer versus, using a discount site or something like that where you purchase directly from the factory is it is a lot harder to get a hold of customer service. Mm-hmm. And when you have a product that you are going to actively hit against things really hard, even if that product is able to sustain that amount of kinetic energy, it's gonna happen. You're gonna have problems.
Yeah,
stuff is gonna break, or something's gonna go wrong, and you're gonna need help getting it sorted out. My entire Q&A section at this point is either people asking if they can order something and still get it delivered if they live overseas, Somebody asking clarifying questions about what's on the website. In some cases, stuff that's written directly in the description of the thing that they're asking the question about. Most of the time, not. And occasionally, like, I have a tech support problem and I don't know how to fix this. What do I do? And then, because if there's one person that has that issue, there's going to be somebody else.
Oh, absolutely.
And so then it's a really good, it's a really good place to then, like, I can put up a video and like, oh, hey, you're having this problem. Every time I encounter that issue, this tends to fix it. If it doesn't fix it, email me.
Mm-hmm.
And then, either it fixes their problem or they email me, and then I can go, oh, that's weird. I've never had that happen before. Let's figure this out.
Yeah.
And then I get to make it right with that person. And then I turn around and I go to my rep and I say, we had this problem. And they'll be like, yeah, it's not supposed to do that. And I'll say, that's what I said. And then, and then they make it right with me.
Mm-hmm.
But getting a package from my manufacturer takes anywhere from 3 weeks to 6 weeks, depending on whether or not something is blocking the Suez Canal at the time.
I remember
it's
that.
happened 3 times this year, by the way. Everybody remembers the first one. Everybody forgets that it's happened 3 times.
I didn't even know it happened 3 times. That is
this year.
Rough. Imagine
the first boat got stuck twice.
Oh man, what a world we live in, where the Suez Canal being blocked is preventing people from getting lightsabers.
Right?
Oh man, it's incredible.
Global news affects me on a level that it never has before. There was also a container ship that went down in the Pacific earlier this year.
Oh no.
That did not hit my news at all. Didn't technically affect me, but it affected the shipping industry tremendously, because there was like all this stuff
mm-hmm.
that that now it's like, well, we have to replace and all these other things. But that's the nice part about working with a company like me, is that if you have a problem, I can fix your problem really quickly, and then however long it takes me to get the problem fixed with the manufacturer, that doesn't affect you. You get to be up and swinging again really fast. You don't have to wait on the shipping times from the other side of the international date line, and getting your problem fixed isn't affected by the Suez Canal being blocked. And so sometimes saving $20 also, like, it comes with strings.
Oh yeah, no, I know that from personal dumb experience. I got one of those stupid cheap ones, because everyone was like, these are great. They are not great. They are not great. They are bad. They are not. They just, mine, the battery kept getting knocked loose, so I ended up fixing it with some electrical tape. It's very janky, but
that's a frustrating problem to happen. Like,
exactly.
That's a frustrating
and nobody
problem to fix.
Nobody could help me. And also, just like the level up lightsaber, like your company one, is so much easier to spin. It's weighted so much nicer. So to anybody listening, I know it's tempting to get a cheap lightsaber, but trust me on this. I know from experience, do not do that. Oh man.
And something else to let people know, because this is something that I didn't realize until after I had been in the game for a little while. Because I went through a lot of companies just getting lightsabers to use for my class before I had a manufacturer, before the website was up.
Mm-hmm.
Working with lots of different lightsaber companies, trying to find something that, like, there are some that the handle gauge is really thick. And so I have a lot of teenagers and a lot of women in my lightsaber class. And so, like, a really big handle gauge, like something that was like a mag light, yes, okay, the light was bright, yes, they were durable, yes, they were easy to fix. They were also really hard to use.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, one of the reasons why I like the ones that I work with is the handle gauge is really manageable for just about anybody. I posted a video yesterday of my daughter attacking a stormtrooper with the one that I gave her for her birthday, which is just like, it's a bonus XP handle with the blade trimmed. But like, so they're fully capable of, beating things, but they're also more manageable for the majority of people.
Mm-hmm.
But the other thing that you see is going hard the other way. And so when you're going to purchase a lightsaber, ideally purchase it from me. I appreciate it.
Yes. And use my link in my bio.
Nice plug. Good work. Check out Ari's bio and click the affiliate link, and that will help support her channel and this podcast.
Exactly. But also you have a lot of new ones too that I'm looking at.
I added a ton of stuff this month.
Yeah, it was very exciting. It's going to be bad for my bank account. Don't tell my parents. As my dad is probably listening to this because he listens to every episode. You didn't hear that from me,
great.
Carrie.
That's awesome.
It is awesome.
But there are some of the ones that are less expensive. The blade diameter is 7/8 inch. And so you'll be looking for blade diameter, or it'll be OD, which stands for outer diameter, because they're a tube. So a tube has an inner diameter and an outer diameter, and most of the time tubes are sold based on their outer diameter and then described at how thick the wall is. And so then if you were like super nerd and you wanted to do the math to figure out what the inner diameter was, you could. But
as a physics student, I am a little tempted.
That's okay. But as a lightsaber purchaser, you don't have to worry about that part. You want to use one that's got a 1 inch outer diameter, unless you're under the age of 7, in which case then a 7/8 inch should probably be fine. But like the blades that are 7/8 inch, you were mentioning like easier to spin, the weight was better and things like that. The 7/8 inch ones, the blade is so much lighter that makes certain things really problematic. And because of the diameter and the physics involved, they're also a lot less durable.
Well, I think my cheap one that I have that I use to, if I'm practicing throws or whatever, just to be safe. I think
they're good for that.
It must be a 7/8 because it's definitely smaller than the.
Is it more narrow?
Yeah, it's definitely more narrow than the one that I got from you. So that's good to know.
You could probably fit that blade into the blade you got from me. Like you probably could. That is the difference between those two things. And so there are some less expensive lightsabers that have a 1 inch outer diameter blade. And so if you're going to go with something that's less expensive, make sure you go that route.
Yeah.
Because it makes such a difference in terms of the durability.
My Obi-Wan spin improved just by getting a better lightsaber. So yeah, trust.
It's got more mass, so you don't have to work as hard to keep the momentum. Exactly. It's easier to keep it spinning.
I was like, wow, I got good overnight and I didn't even practice. So yeah, truly not to be super plugging for this company, but check it out because it's really good.
Did we mention that there was a link in Ari's bio?
Yeah, did we mention
click
that?
And purchase a lightsaber. And support
you won't
her
regret it. It is better than a stick. Also, let's not forget.
It is a guarantee that I am very comfortable making.
And yeah, super durable too, though. And I know this because of the amount of times I've hit myself with it, and it's fine. But I do want to pick your brain a bit because you are a martial artist and have been forever. On just like lightsabers in general, and if you were going to be in Star Wars, what you think you would pick as the best, like weapon lightsaber wise? Like, would you go with a single, or would you go with the double blade, or would you go with 2 single blades? Like, this is so. What do you think is the best?
All right. Okay.
And what do you think is coolest? Because that might be different. It might be 2 different.
And so, the lightsaber as a weapon is a terrible weapon. It's terrible.
But it looks cool.
So it looks cool, and it is one of the most iconic weapons in the history of ever.
Yeah.
There are it's very difficult to find movie weapons that are on the same tier of like capturing people's imagination like lightsaber. Like anything that's like lightsaber tier is some kind of an iconic weapon from a video game franchise that has been around for multiple decades. Like that's the only stuff that's on that level. Mm-hmm. Although we'll see what happens now that there's the He-Man reboot. Maybe that sword is going to or maybe we'll get a Thundercats remake and that'll, and that sword will come back. But that is like any conversation of like practical application of lightsaber. You've been training. you've learned your Obi-Wan, you've done some different stuff. We live in a time where we can't just replace a severed appendage with a robotic one that works exactly the same as the original.
Yeah.
Now, we have some really cool artificial appendages. There's some really cool stuff that exists now that didn't exist 5 years ago. But there's nothing on the level of this works exactly the same as, you know, as an organic one. Without that level of medical technology, I don't want any part of using a lightsaber. Just don't. There is so much of my anatomy that I wouldn't have if I was training lightsabers with real lightsabers. So that's
same. I'd have nothing left pretty much.
Because it's like depending on what you do with your elbow when you're learning the Obi-Wan, you either whack yourself in the calf a lot or you whack yourself in the back of the head a lot.
Or both,
one of those
if you're
two.
me.
Sometimes it's both, because you'll make an adjustment and then you'll overcorrect and then you whack yourself in the head.
Yep.
And then next you're like, oh, I got to make sure I don't do that again. Then you whack yourself in the calf. And so that's the caveat, right? Like you have to be willing to recognize that to talk about the lightsaber as a practical weapon. Practical. Right?
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. Second thing. And so visual aid time. And so if you're listening to this will be a little bit harder to understand, but I will try to explain. And so this is one of my struggles with the lightsaber staff. So the lightsaber staff looks awesome.
Yeah.
Looks awesome. All right. And so you mentioned that you were studying physics. I've alluded to it a couple of times now. You are familiar with the concept of a lever, yes?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
So let's say I have a staff and I'm swinging one side of that out.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So now the other side has to be going in the opposite direction. And so the thing is, if somebody were to take this part of the lever and hit it this way, I'm dead.
So what I'm hearing is
nothing I can do about it.
Staff lightsaber, the double blade, not a good idea.
Well, but this circles back to the lightsabers are a fundamentally flawed weapon because of their level of deadliness. They are a fundamentally flawed weapon because they are punishingly effective at unaliving somebody.
Yes.
However, the consequence of an oopsie is so much higher than every melee weapon in the history of ever.
Yeah.
Just so much higher. And so that aspect of physics, whereas if I have a double-bladed lightsaber and I have one end of the saber going away from me, if that end of the saber is hit there's probably about a third of the possible directions that it could be hit in, if not a little bit more than that, are things that would remove pieces of my anatomy that I need in order to still be alive.
Yes. And
so that's a limitation of staff. Staff choreography looks awesome because you have the two sides of it as it spins. So you get not just like the arc, you get these sort of propeller kind of visuals that look cool.
Yeah.
And but because both sides are so dangerous, the way you have to move it, the choreography has to be a little bit different. I don't know. I am sure that there are martial artists and human beings that could have done as good a job with Darth Maul as Ray Park did. I don't know that there are any human beings that could have done it better. That choreography that he had to do was really, really difficult, especially because it needed to not look like the other people weren't trying to kill him.
Yeah.
And that, and some other things like that. And so, one of the things that makes that fight scene so spectacular is that Liam Neeson's got a lot of stage combat experience and Ray Park is freaking good.
Yeah, that fight scene is awesome.
It's and there's so much movement and everything else. But so that's a limitation of the staff. Watching lightsaber choreography, getting to watch a staff in action is something I really enjoy, and we don't get to see it enough. If I had my all right, assuming that I'm living in a time where major injuries from lightsabers could be easily repaired through back to tank and robotics and all these other caveats, right?
Yeah.
the lightsaber spear, the lightsaber polearm,
Mm.
would be what I would like to see the most. Would be what I'd like to do the most. Spear is one of my favorite weapons, just in general. Spear is historically one of the most effective melee weapons ever. The most common way of equipping a soldier for an incredibly long period of the world's history was a shield and a spear.
Yeah.
And some of that is because spears were generally less expensive to make than swords, but some of that is because spears are better at a lot of stuff, especially when you have a bunch of them in a row. And so there are a lot of things about the spear that it is one of my favorite weapons. Taking us from lightsabers to samurai, because Lucas and the Jedi and the Sith are heavily influenced by Akira Kurosawa samurai movies and samurai in general. Miyamoto Musashi is one of the most famous duelists in the history of Japan.
Mm-hmm.
He's the author of the Book of Five Rings, the Gorin no Sho, and there's a lot of documented history about Musashi that allows us to know a lot about him. There's also a lot of lore surrounding Musashi in the same way of like John Henry and Paul Bunyan and like, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
The only fight Musashi was ever in that he didn't win was against a duelist that watched him extensively and decided, all right, because Musashi was somewhere in the vicinity of 6 feet tall, in a world where a vast majority of people were like 5'6", and so like Musashi was literally a giant, and we know, at least from the perspective of everybody involved, and that was a huge aspect of his dominance, was that he was just so much physically longer than people that had to fight him. The only duel he ever lost, didn't win, is this combatant fought him to a draw using what is called a Jo staff, or a Roshaku Jo. And Jo staff technique, it's a sort of a medium length staff. It's not as long as a quarter staff, not as long as a bow. But it's a little bit of spear and a little bit of sword mashed into one weapon is the way you use it. And so that being able to get just that little bit of reach on somebody, even if they're better than you, reach is really hard to overcome.
Right.
And if you're both about the same level of good, reach is a incredibly dominant advantage. Game of Thrones fans, I'm still disappointed that the Viper went out the way he did. But that, like, we see that same logic applied. It's the, like, if I use the spear, I'm going to have this advantage of mobility and reach that is going to be impossible to overcome. And ultimately it was, but then he made a bad choice. And so lightsaber spear, that's what I would want to do. If I'm not allowed to tap into exotics, like if it's got to be stuff that we've seen on film and in the animateds and things like that, I enjoy single saber training more than double saber, more than staff, more than everything else. It's because there's a singular focus to it that I like.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so I enjoy doing that more.
Yeah,
Martial arts and Star Wars, I'm gonna have no chill. I'm sorry, it's
no.
I'm gonna ramble. It's just how it's gonna be.
This is great. The other thing I wanted to ask is the difference, I guess I'll phrase it this way, between a normal grip and reverse grip, like our Queen Ahsoka. Is there any advantage to reverse grip, or is it actually worse? Because it's hard to do stuff with. I've tried.
Okay. And this is and this is like the reverse grip discussion in Sword TikTok and Sword Instagram and Sword Tumblr and whatever. It's like reverse grip conversations in the weapons world are guaranteed to get you some interesting feedback. But so one of the reasons why we see a disproportionate amount of reverse grip in movie, cartoon, etc. choreography is one of the biggest problems that filmmakers have with weapons is that it's really hard to have your principal actor's face and the weapon in the screen at the same time.
Mm.
And so what reverse grip allows you to do is get the weapons and the people closer together because it shortens your reach. And so we're gonna always see sequences in movies, TV shows, whatever. Like, I mean, there was reverse grip longsword in The Witcher, which is just
I
it's
didn't
just
even know.
not something you would do.
I'm gonna
It's
rewatch The Witcher soon, so I'm gonna look for that.
there's a thing where he does this, and so we are always going to see it in stage fighting, always, because it solves a problem of cameras
So
that
basically, it's a theatrical advantage.
but it's also so when you're talking about fighting and when you're talking about weapon arts and other things, the answer is always it depends.
Right.
And so then you have to dive into, well, what does it depend on? Generally speaking, the forehand grip is going to be superior to a reverse grip because it has more reach. It's more versatile. It can move more ways. It can do more stuff. And so because you have more possibilities, then there's more stuff the other person has to prevent. Whereas
Right.
reverse grip, because your arm only moves certain ways in that
Yeah.
angle,
Yeah.
and especially only moves certain ways with power, that it makes it a lot easier for the other person to narrow down what they have to protect themselves from.
Right. That makes sense.
In most sword fighting, whether it's HEMA or um, HEMA, Kendo is the Japanese samurai sword fencing. The overhead grip,
Hmm.
like some version of an overhand guard, is a really, really prevalent, very dominant guard because I can attack from here, basically not just vertically, not just angularly, but it doesn't take that much to have this be horizontal.
Right.
And so the person's got to protect themselves from the belly button up. And so they've got all this real estate that they have to be prepared to cover. And from here, I can attack any of it with a step.
Right.
And depending on which foot I step with, whether it's coming across my body this way or whatever. And so, like, that's one of the realities of combat, is that versatility and adaptability is going to give you more that you can do, make it harder for the other person to fight you.
Right.
Okay. It's also possible to be better than the other person, but if you are predictable, then you're beatable. And so there are certain things that we have seen in sports, and the Olympics is a really good time to sort of experience this, because in some sports it doesn't matter if the other person is better, if they are, like, they might purely be better, but if strategically or tactically or executionally or whatever, if they are more predictable, then the other person can have a much higher chance of being able to win out, because they can basically just sort of bet on the person's tendencies, and so you fight their tendencies rather than having to beat the whole person's skill. You beat their tendencies.
Right.
And there are a lot of upsets historically that's basically how it worked out, um, and that that shapes this conversation too, right? And so the way that reverse grip can work, okay, and
Okay.
so this is all these caveats. The other person needs to have a reach that you can get inside
Okay.
that is also greater than your forehand reach. So if the other person has greater reach than your forehand reach, so you're giving up reach to the other person anyway, then giving up a little bit more is different than if you both have the same reach.
Right. That makes sense.
Okay?
Hmm.
All right? So that's that. All right? If they have greater reach than you, but there's not a way to get inside that reach, then it's very difficult to make reverse grip work.
Right.
Where reverse grip is going to function. Okay? Other person has greater reach. Their reach is something that you can get inside. You are going to take your sword and use it like a knife.
Hmm.
And that's that's where it can operate. And there are some there's competitive saber sparring. The Saber Legion is one of the better known ones. Ludo Sport is the biggest one out of Europe. Um, that they have, full contact tournaments. People are strapped in HEMA gear, and then they whack the crap out of each other in these tournaments. Dual wielding weapons. There are some people that do a shorter weapon in their offhand, and they do a longer weapon in their dominant hand, and they use that shorter weapon less like it's a knife, less like it's a sword, and more like it's a knife or a hook.
All right.
And that sort of thing. And so that's where reverse grip is going to have a place. So it's not that it is entirely without purpose. There are a lot of people that will argue that reverse grip is useless. And those people are not. They are thinking of it in the context of their meta for their activity, right, rather than a broader meta.
This is very interesting. I'm learning a lot.
Reverse and conversations about the reverse grip. Oh man, you can find them.
I think I might be a little scared to try to find them. Just stick with what I've learned here.
In weapon circles, it's like, as a Star Wars fan, there are certain arguments that it's just like, oh god, it's this argument again. and then there are people on opposing hills that they have been entrenched in the hill so long that they're going to die there.
Yeah.
And it's just like, and then you're just having to watch those people lob mortar fire at each other, and it's just like, not again. And that is reverse grip sword talk. That is like, it's not hard to find it on TikTok. Oh
man.
And both sides have zealots.
As do both sides of anything.
Pretty much, especially if it's an argument that's been happening for a really long time.
Yeah. Well, thank you for all of that. That's quite interesting. I, for one, have learned some things. I'm excited to be rewatching this so I can, re-solidify it because, yeah, pick out all this stuff. That was mostly what I wanted to pick your brain about for like lightsabers. I do want to talk about, of course, we mentioned earlier, the High Republic, because I think you'll have an interesting perspective, again, because you've been a Star Wars fan for a lot longer than me. And for me, I'm loving it. I keep saying it owns me. Like every new thing that comes out, I'm immediately buying. And that's not really me. Usually like with books and stuff, I get them from the library or whatnot. But like these, I'm like, I need them all right now. And I think I'm liking it so much because of the unique perspective we're getting of the Jedi kind of in their prime. Because I've said this many times, I'm not a very big fan of the prequel Jedi as like, I'll call it an institution, I guess. Like individually, some of them are okay.
We're not gonna besmirch Plo Koon here, are we?
Oh, absolutely not. He's one of the good ones. All right. Plo Koon.
Like if you want to trash Ki-Adi-Mundi,
Obi-Wan, the quote unquote bad ones. Ki-Adi-Mundi. I'm sorry, but I gotta say Mace Windu.
Are you about to slander Mace Windu?
I am. I'm so sorry.
Okay. Right, because clearly it was Mace Windu's fault that Anakin didn't get it.
Okay, no, actually, that is the reason I dislike Mace is his treatment of Ahsoka, not in Clone Wars Season 7. Those comments were dumb. I didn't appreciate them, but that's not worth hating him for. I dislike him because of his treatment of Ahsoka in Season 5. He was very much on the we have to save face, goodbye side of the council, as was, Ki-Adi-Mundi, Yoda. So not super thriving, but I am enjoying the High Republic for two main reasons about the Jedi. The one is, of course, we're seeing them in their prime, seeing them before, they've been corrupted. And I find that really interesting. And two, in the High Republic Adventures comic specifically, I'm seeing a side of Yoda that I think is really fun. He's running around.
Yoda's talking trash in like episode 2. I loved it. It was like,
he's just running around.
Yoda just talks smack.
Doing stuff. He's baking. Turns out he's a big baker, so that's pretty fun. And yeah, I think the High Republic is very chaotic too. Like all of these Jedi are very, very unique, very different. A lot of them give off what I say are Qui-Gon vibes. Mainly because they're dedicated to what they're doing, but a lot of them are also kind of like but I'm also going to do a bit of my own thing, which I appreciate. But those are like my big overall thoughts, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about how you're feeling about the High Republic so far.
And this is not to diminish your love of Qui-Gon. Okay.
Okay. And nothing could diminish my love of Qui-Gon. He's my space dad. Okay.
As a teacher, as a martial arts instructor, Qui-Gon does something in Phantom Menace that to me is reprehensible. And so he wants to teach Anakin so bad that when the council's like, no, we're not gonna, he's too old, we're not gonna do this. Qui-Gon's like, then I will train him personally. And then the council's like, dude, you only get one Padawan. And so then he's like, that's fine. Bye, Ewan.
Yeah.
Good luck, buddy. He's totally ready. Like that to me, that was the, like, if training Anakin is that important to you, fine. There is not an excuse. There is nothing that is so important as discarding a student.
That's a very good point, actually. I will take that into consideration.
No,
but I still love him.
No,
but you're totally right, though.
And all the Jedi are so different in terms of their connection to the Force and how they teach and how they interact with people. Like, one of the reasons why I love Plo Koon so much is, like, you know, I saw all the movies before I watched any of Clone Wars at all.
Right.
I didn't come back to Clone Wars until start the Clone Wars animated until right before The Force Awakens came out.
Right.
Was my first opportunity to sort of stream it. And I meet Plo Koon and he says to the clones, but not to me. And I was just like, all right, I'm in. I don't know anything else about this guy. I'm in.
Plo Koon is truly, he's up there. Like, there are some prequel Jedi.
He's such a great space dad.
There are some prequel Jedi that I absolutely adore. But like I said, a lot of them just make me want to, But
and there's also, like, in the prequels, one of the things for me with the prequel Jedi that we had to get from the prequel Jedi so that the stories could connect is we had to have certain things that are just like, well, wait a minute, why did they do that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, from a plot perspective, they make total sense. Just I'm not a fan of them specifically, but 100% from a plot perspective, like, and that's why too, like, I don't have any issue with the whole Mace Windu, because first of all, it wasn't just Mace Windu's decision to not make Anakin a master. Like, let's just be pretty clear on that.
He wasn't ready.
He also
demonstrated that he wasn't ready when he got mad that he didn't get it. Like,
exactly.
If you want it, and they say, no, you're not ready, and then you get pissed that somebody tells you you're not ready, you have demonstrated that you're not ready. Exactly.
That's so, like, I couldn't be mad. My thing, once again, is just the whole treatment of Ahsoka.
Well, and the treatment of Ahsoka is, and that's all, and that's hugely viable, right? Like, that's another, and so they never explain in a way that makes sense why Yoda was all ahead and on board with using the clones, because it was such obviously a bad idea to use them.
Yeah, and also, like, there's the part in season 6 when they, like, find out definitively that the clones were given to them by the Separatists, and Yoda straight up says something along the lines of, how nice, we got a gift from our enemy, we're gonna keep using them. Like, and they wonder, I've made this comment, like, and they wonder why, like, huh?
That it's and it doesn't make sense for Yoda to not be the person to be like, no, this is a bad idea.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it doesn't make sense that Yoda is on board. But if the Jedi reject the clones, then the clones aren't in a position during Order 66. If the clones aren't in a position in Order 66 to execute the Jedi, then the prequels can't connect to the original trilogy, and it's too late to change the original trilogy.
Yeah. So, they kind of, there are a few things that are kind of like, I understand why, but yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me either. I remember watching that episode and being like, so y'all know something bad is probably going to happen. And you're like, it's fine.
What could possibly go wrong? But so the prequel Jedi are hampered with we had to start the movie with the council stable and the galaxy like under a little bit of duress, but not that chaotic.
Mm-hmm.
So we had the first movie is that, and then we have to get all the way to Anakin decides to be a mass murderer.
Yeah.
We had to go from 9-year-old Anakin, and like the galaxy is pretty close to okay. Like there's a lot of things that could be better, but like the galaxy overall pretty okay.
Yeah.
We had to go from that to Anakin as a mass murderer in 3 movies. And most of the journey to Anakin as a mass murderer happens in like the last hour of the 3rd movie.
That's why Clone Wars is so good. Clone Wars is so good.
It fills in
so
all this
much.
stuff.
Yeah.
But Clone Wars is also limited by the fact of like decisions that are made within the movies that don't make sense, like using the clones. Like that there's not a way to rationally explain why it makes sense. You have to acknowledge that well, if it went any other way, there's not a good way to put the clone to put anybody in a position to kill the Jedi.
Yeah.
Because it has to happen suddenly and en masse for there to be so few Jedi left.
Yeah.
And so like there isn't a good way to go from the Jedi Council and Phantom Menace to that happening and Anakin turning. And so like all the Jedi decisions throughout Clone Wars are limited by what takes place in the movies because that happened first.
Yeah.
And so like there's a lot of detail that gets to be filled in. There's a lot of characters that get to be explained or introduced or whatever. You realize the first time you watch Revenge of the Sith, if you haven't seen Clone Wars, you're like, who's this green tentacly guy? He's a chump.
I know. And you know what? He's awesome.
He just died like a chump. And then you see the Clone Wars, it's like, oh, he's really good. It's not that he's a chump, it's that Sidious is really good. That's not what I took away from that scene.
Oh no, when I first watched it, I was like, these Jedi suck. And then I'm watching the Clone Wars, specifically the water arc from season 4, and I was like, damn, Kit Fisto's got moves. Maybe he's just not good on land.
But it was also like in Revenge of the Sith, there was already going to be a fight scene that was so long that there was a whole section of it that they had originally planned out and storyboarded that they removed before they started doing choreography because the fight scene was going to be too long.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were acts within the fight scene that they removed because it was too long. And so they weren't going to be able to do a protracted fight scene with Sidious and a bunch of Jedi. And so it had to be more immediate and more sudden. And so then our takeaway from that isn't, man, Sidious is a bad man.
No, it's these Jedi are chumps.
These Jedi are chumps. That's what we took away. And so these were all limitations of the prequels because of how they were made and how the story was told. High Republic doesn't have any of that baggage. It doesn't have to connect to the original trilogy.
Yeah.
And so with exception to Yoda, there's not a single character so far that we've met that we know whether or not they're going to make it.
Yeah, that's the scary part. As I'm reading.
And so so stakes are more real.
Mm-hmm.
In the prequels, most of the stakes aren't real because we know who's going to survive. We just don't know how yet.
Yeah.
And the High Republic doesn't have that baggage. The High Republic also gives us what the prequel movies kind of did a couple of times, but weren't able to do en masse, which is put a whole bunch of Jedi in a problem at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And just like a bunch of Jedi working a big problem. And that's like, the sea of lightsabers turning on at the same time. That's something that we haven't really gotten, that we're getting.
Yeah.
And all of these Jedi with different, so like Daniel Jose Older is on TikTok, has become a friend of mine. Really cool guy.
Oh, I'm so jealous. I want to be his friend. Gotta go
but the High Republic it gets to give us, a lot of people are saying what you said with the Jedi that are uncorrupted, but to me, it's a Star Wars story without baggage.
Yeah.
And so like we're getting a little bit of fan service, but not as much as other stories. So it gets to be itself. And since it isn't starting with movies and it isn't starting with TV shows, it's starting with written work, it's starting with comic books, it's starting with these sorts of things. Because of that, it's getting a chance to be itself. And it doesn't have to carry the baggage of other characters or other people's perceptions of characters, because everything's new.
Yeah.
And like the way they've constructed the Nile is very interesting. the way they've constructed a lot of stuff is really cool. We should probably do a spoiler warning.
Yes, spoiler warning. Consider this your spoiler warning.
So we'll cut this out and we'll move it to the front.
Yeah. Spoiler. I'll just put it at the beginning of the High Republic stuff. Spoiler warning. High Republic. I feel like most people probably could have figured this out, but we are talking about the High Republic, and there will be spoilers probably. So if you haven't read it yet, I don't know what you're doing if you haven't started. Let's go to Barnes and Noble, go to Chapters now. Like, let's go pick it up. Light of the Jedi is where you start, and then the rest.
And then after that, it's a rabbit hole.
And after that, you will get sucked in and spend all your money on High Republic stuff.
But the IDW comic is there are adult Jedi teachers, but the central figures are really these Padawans that are following around Yoda and Buckets of Blood.
Which, as a side note, is incredible.
Isn't he fantastic?
And the best part about Buckets of Blood is that he's a healer. And then they're like, why is that your name then? He was like, isn't it obvious? Because like I heal people. And they're like, that's not obvious at all.
It's a lot of blood. I put it back in them. Like,
yeah. Oh, it's so fun. And like you look at him like in the comic too, like he looks scary. He looks like, I read his nickname was Buckets of Blood. I was like, yeah, that checks out. And then it was like, he's a healer. And I was, what?
And then you find out why. And it's just like, hold on.
Yeah.
And he's a great counterpoint to Yoda because they're like so visually different and they're so like they're energetically different, like, you know.
And my favorite part was they were going off to, I can't remember where they were going, but he was like, we better be back soon because I put some baking in the oven. I was just like,
he's trying out Yoda's recipe.
Yeah, that's what he said. It's so funny. Oh man,
he's a marvelous character. But there's a very heavy story being told between these two characters. That there are two characters that were raised in a culture that mistrusted and disliked the Jedi and believed the Force to be inherently evil.
Yep.
And believed Jedi to be one of the things that is wrong in the galaxy. And so then these two characters, through the events of the story, get separated and they go through a very similar experience of being adopted into a group. One of those characters gets adopted into the Nihil. One of those characters gets adopted into the Jedi. And the way that those two different experiences are shown, and the way that, like being somebody that works with kids, like watching the way that the Nihil groom this child to become capable of violence despite their desire to not, and their fear and all these other things, like the way that they groom this character like that. It's, for me as an adult that works with kids, as a parent, as somebody that has gone through trainings to understand about signs of abuse and grooming and stuff like that, like seeing all of it, I'm just like, oh, that makes this person so much creepier, just so much creepier, and so much more vile than many Star Wars villains we have otherwise experienced.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like Thrawn is a villain that you can kind of understand. You understand why he has come up through the ranks the way that he has, been the person that he is, brilliant but authoritarian and all that kind of stuff. So he is a villain that, while you may not necessarily want to have a drink with him, he's a different kind of villain. The Nihil, like between the helmet and the swirly eye and all the other stuff, it's like,
the Nihil are scary. The Nihil are very scary.
And just icky. Like I don't know how long I'm gonna have to wait to get it, but I really want to see that guy punched in the face. I really want to see him punched in the face. I want to watch his stupid mask crack and then his nose start bleeding. Like that is
Yeah, he's very because I know you haven't finished Light of the Jedi, so like I won't say much, but
go ahead, spoil. It's okay.
No, I honestly,
go ahead.
I don't really remember what was Light of the Jedi and what was the Rising Storm, so I will be careful. But I did find it very interesting at first I was like, oh, like Mark Hanro is kind of like just interesting guy, and his dad got stabbed in the back by his people. Like I thought he was interesting, and like I don't want to say a good dude, but like less evil than like the Tempest runners. And then there was a point in Light of the Jedi that he did something. I can't remember even what it was. And I was like, oh, this guy is evil to the core. Like he's not. And then I was like, how dare he try to get my sympathy? I was like, Charles Soule, how dare you make me feel bad for this guy who's actually just like the worst. But again, super interesting. And that's the one thing I also am really enjoying about the High Republic is that we're getting like this very in-depth perspective of like the bad guys and how they work and everything. And like I'm don't like them, but I'm invested in them because I think it's interesting. And it's cool because it's not like a villain we've seen before in Star Wars because they're not the Sith. So that's also super neat.
They're not the Sith and they're not the Empire.
Exactly.
It's like the Empire is destructive authoritarianism.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of what the Empire is sort of trying to represent. The Nihil are destructive chaos.
Oh yeah.
Like that's very much in the new High Republic novels. They are or stories in general. The villains are destructive chaos.
Yes.
Like that's what the villains are. Whereas in all the other Star Wars that we've seen, the villains are oppressive, destructive authoritarianism, like oppressive, oppressive imperialism, which was part of the message of the OT is that imperialism is bad, and to a degree, a commentary about America being assholes internationally.
Yeah.
And Lucas has not been shy about talking about that.
I know. Yeah. It's so funny when people are like, keep politics out of Star Wars, and it's like George Lucas literally based it on like, oh man, it's like Star Wars.
Listen to him talk about it. Do you understand who he was criticizing with this movie?
Star Wars is so inherently political. It's not even funny. Oh, yeah.
Like maybe A New Hope. Like that's probably the only one that's like not.
Yeah, A New Hope is
that's not political commentary. Well, it's sort of a derivative story just told in a very new way. Whereas like the prequels, the prequels had a story they were trying to tell and some social commentary that they wanted to make, and they were not shy about what it was going to be.
They were not.
The Clone Wars has the like the announcer, like the animated show has the like the World War II era, like the Atlantic accent.
Yeah.
You know, like radio announcer, like it's the lead in to a World War II news broadcast.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I noticed that, and I was just like, this is part of the commentary, isn't it?
I know. I remember too. Like, first, I was like, what am I watching? But also, it's like kind of good.
It's like it's awesome stylistically, but it's also something that is like, oh, there's a lot of that was very intentional. Like that was very purposeful. And High Republic thus far has been less scathing with its critique. It's been less. I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, but there hasn't been a very obvious target, which isn't tremendously shocking. Mm-hmm. By trying to sort of mainstream the stories, they're not going to have as strong a political voice, I don't expect.
Yeah.
And especially given the importance of global market at this point, like Rogue One was wildly unpopular in China. Is incredibly popular here in the U.S. and the Western world in general. From the perspective of a Chinese moviegoer, Rogue One was a movie about a terrorist cell that successfully attacked a government installation.
Yeah.
And it's like it's not a movie about independence and fighting for freedom and taking down the evil authoritarian regime. These are all things that we see from that movie, and there are other cultures that they see that movie and their perspective on it's very different. And that's going to be a reality of theatrical releases and movies that are like the big budget stuff is the impact that certain symbols have on a global audience.
Yeah.
Because that's the world we live in now. Mandalorian is fantastic. It's awesome.
So good.
It's a great story. The characters are interesting. It's very complex. The characters are really likable, and Grogu is like the ideal gateway drug for a Star Wars thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Grogu and Pedro Pascal.
How could that not have been a successful? Yeah, how could that not have been a successful show? I mean, like literally, and then you throw in, some cool stuff that's a little more obscure for like the Rebel stuff and all that, so that the hardcore fans are like, "Whoa, this is sick!" And then the newer fans are like, "Oh, I want to know like what that's from," and you get the Thrawn name drop, which was like. Gets us excited for the next part of what's coming out.
Yeah, wait a minute, that means we're going to find out what happened to Ezra, finally!
Finally!
How many years has it been? But it also, like, it's a story, it has certain commentary about, like, there's a degree of social commentary happening, but it's not pointed.
Yeah.
It is softened, and part of that is accessibility. Part of that is it's a TV show, it's not a movie. Part of that is also like it's being corporate made rather than, once Lucas had success with A New Hope, he wasn't worried about satisfying studios with his films.
Yeah.
He wasn't that was not a concern for him, and so he was going to tell the story he wanted, and we can say that was a good thing or a bad thing based on our own perspective, but that's a reality of his storytelling and his methodology, because he liked telling complicated stories. That was the way that he liked to work, and he liked, most of the time he had a metaphor that he wanted to tell.
Yeah.
More so than, like, he had a metaphor that he wanted to show, and then he wrapped the story around the metaphor. And so there's so many things that in Star Wars, it's if you ask more than one question, it gets to, well, yeah, but he wanted to say this.
Yeah.
And so it had to be that way so he could say that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm excited to see kind of what happens with the High Republic, where it goes. But as you've said, it's nice because they can do whatever they want, basically. It's also a little bit terrifying because they can do whatever they want, and I really like all of the characters. I'm kind of like what you were saying at the beginning. When you're a kid, you don't know if something's going to be okay. And as an adult, you're like, okay, well, this is a movie. The main character, they can't die yet. I don't know that with the High Republic. You don't know who
the main characters are.
They can kill anyone they want. Like at the beginning of Light of the Jedi, there's that chapter about the guy who's like at the station that's like watching stuff, and then he's thinking about how he's going to go
get vaporized.
Yeah, he's thinking about, he's like, oh yeah, I'm going to go ask this girl out. We're going to have a great time, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like, and that was the end of so-and-so. And I'm just like, what? Like, I've noticed several of the Star Wars books I read recently have been doing things like that, where they like open with like a chapter about somebody and you're like, oh, this must be the main character. And then it's like, end of the chapter's like, and then they died. Same with like the pilot of the Legacy run. She's like doing her inspections. I was like, oh, cool, this is great. And it's like, and then the captain went down with her ship. Like the first 100 pages of Light of the Jedi were brutal.
Well, like all the first chapters of Light of the Jedi, all of them are from the perspective of somebody that is going to die as a result of the hyperspace attack.
Yeah.
Like all the opening chapters. And so you're getting these, like, you're hopping around the galaxy, so you get this sense of how widespread this is and how big a coordinated attack this is. And you also get all of these human stories. So you get to connect with the person just in time for them to be a dust cloud.
Yeah. Great.
Like, and it also, like, it then, as an audience member, it gives you, it establishes for you, stakes exist, people are mortal, and what is happening is big enough and catastrophic enough that this could happen to anybody at any time that we introduce you to. And so then what happens with Light of the Jedi after all of that, every time you meet a new character, when you meet a Padawan, when you meet a Jedi, as soon as you meet somebody new, there is a part of you that's like, brace for impact.
I know. I'm like, don't fall in love with any of the characters.
I can't get too attached. They're going to get hit by a space rock.
Yeah, I think that's also one of the reasons why I'm enjoying it so much, is because I have no idea what's going to happen. There's no way anything's been spoiled. Like, even, so like Rebels, I watched just this year, and like, arguably most of Rebels, if you would have watched it as it came out, you wouldn't have known what was going to happen, because we never really see these characters in canon ever again. So I think that would have been really fun to watch at the beginning. Of course, when I watched it, I knew everything that was going to happen. I was fully braced for season 4, episode 10 with I can't even say it. I still wept like a child and curled up in a blanket for so long, but like, I knew.
I know it's coming. I know it's coming.
And so I still love Rebels. I think
it's not going to hurt as bad.
I know. I'm like, I still love it. I think it's great. But I think one of the reasons why I'm so invested in the High Republic is just because it's like, nobody knows what's going to happen. I don't know. Nobody knows. We can all like predict and be scared of what's going to happen, because absolutely nobody has witnessed this before. Like, we are the first people to experience this, which is really, really exciting. And for most of Star Wars content, aside from like the newer stuff that is now coming out, like, that's not something I experienced, right? Because I started being a big Star Wars fan in about 2015. So like,
Vader was spoiled for you by the time you cared.
Yeah, exactly.
You already knew that big reveal. There's no, like, until now, for Star Wars fans, there haven't been that many opportunities to get surprised.
Yeah.
And now there are a lot of them, which is exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think we covered everything I wanted to cover. We should wrap because, some people, it's definitely late for you. It feels late for me, and it's not even that late because I live in Mountain Time Zone. But thanks for coming on. This was great. To anybody who was listening to us, we really appreciate it. I will tag all of Master Alan's stuff in the description, so definitely check it out. Feel free to reach out to either of us on social media. Unless you're going to be mean, then we don't want to hear from you. But
no, they can be mean. Forever NPC is a friend of mine on TikTok, and one of the things he does is every time he bans, every time he gets to 100 people that he's banned, then he buys himself something nice. And so then anytime somebody shows up and is a jerk or whatever, he just goes one step closer.
You know what? I kind of like that. I might start adopting that for my ban list of people.
That was how he ended up buying one of my lightsabers. It was the nice thing he bought for himself when he banned a 100th person, like when he hit a threshold.
That's so funny. Okay, so you can be mean. You can be mean, because then we can buy lightsabers, which, by the way, you should be buying from Level Up Light through my link. Let's not forget. But yeah, all that being said, thanks for listening, everybody who's still here, and hope you're having a great day, night, morning, evening, whatever it is, wherever you are listening. And as always, may the Force be with you.
May the Force be with you.